this guy comes out and he's singing a folk song, and it starts with the scene with Ann Eller. Very different from a musical. So they thought, well, we really want to stay as true to the play as possible. So, what am I going to write? What are we going to do? Well, why don't we try it? So he writes the lyrics to "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning." Oh, and this is interesting. Because I told you they wanted to stay very connected to the play. Well, in the play, the stage directions, the opening of Green Grow the Lilacs, Hammerstein read this. This was in the play. It is a radiant summer morning several years ago, the kind of morning which, enveloping the slopes of earth, men, cattle in the meadow, blades of young corn, streams, making them seem to exist now for the first time, their images giving off a visible golden emanation that is partly true and partly a trick of the imagination, focusing to keep alive a loveliness that may pass away. I mean, you don't need to write anything. So he read that and was so inspired that, he came up with the lyrics to "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning." He gives it to Richard Rodgers, and in 10 minutes he writes "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning." Amazing. So Rodgers knows pretty quickly that this is going to be something different than he's ever experienced. Well, as they begin working on the play, they begin to notice that it's very different from any kind of story or structure that's ever really been done before. I mean, again, think about plays before. There's this, it was running at the same time. Ethel Merman was in something called Something for the Boys. And, it was a great old Merman story. It was set during the war. But the thrust of the story is she's this tough broad living out on the range in Texas, and she's getting radio signals in the fillings of her teeth that give the army information about the positions of the Germans. So, and on top of it, they're singing, those great old Cole Porter songs. Not exactly what we're dealing with here. So, just to give you a little idea of just a study in opposites. So what Rodgers and Hammerstein realized as they were start working on this is an opportunity. We want to make sure that every song that we write defines the character, continues the dialogue, continues the story without any seam at all. We want to make sure that everything, there's nothing that we can do. If we write anything sort of like we've written before, it's not going to be as organic to the story as the story really requires. So, and I started noticing this as we were working on it. None of the songs have intros. And it's so interesting. Like, not one of the songs has intros. Like, when Will Parker is talking to Ann Eller, she says, "You were in Kansas City. I bet you carried on." He said, "Well, I didn't carry on, but I saw some things I never saw before. I got to Kansas City on a Friday, and it went right into the dialogue." And almost every song, when Laurie says to Ada Wendy, she says, "You can't just go around kissing everybody. Didn't anyone tell you that?" "Yeah, they told me." It ain't so much a question. And that's exactly, it went right from dialogue right into song. So this was kind of, they realized that they had to continue this way of writing throughout. Now they also decided that, of course, we want dance. What does the dance look like? Well, some musicals in the 30s had ballet, but not many. But because this is going to be so incredibly new, let's incorporate ballet into it in a way that if the songs integrate into the story, integrate into the characters, let the dance then tell the story even more. Well, who had just finished choreographing Rodeo by Aaron Copland for New York City Ballet was Agnes de Mille. So she seemed to be the logical character for, or person to do the choreography. So when she found out about it, I think she was approached, and then she campaigned pretty heavily to Rodgers and Hammerstein and to Teresa Helmer at the Theater Guild to become the choreographer, and eventually she was. So now we've got a wonderful choreographer. We've got Rodgers and Hammerstein. And the director that they chose his name was Ruben Mamoulian, who had directed Porgy and Bess. And he'd done a number of films with Rodgers and Hart. So he was pretty much of a veteran of both film and Broadway. So and quite a taskmaster. So now we've got this team together. The poor Theater Guild has no money. And so they're going around, of course, bringing actors and singers to rich people, kind of presenting, and no one wants to put any money in this thing. It's a cowboy musical. Who wants to see a cowboy musical? No one was, and they had a really hard time raising the money. But the clock is ticking, and so finally the show does go into rehearsal. There were a lot of problems in the casting, not so much problems, but a lot of opinions. Rodgers and Hammerstein wanted actors who sang. Agnes DeMille wanted her dancers, and they were not the typical kind of dancers that you would see in a musical. The other thing that was so odd about Oklahoma, as you see, is that the girls don't come on until about halfway through the middle of the first act, which is so unusual for a musical at that time. So there were a lot of kind of interesting confrontations between the creative team with the casting. But eventually they kind of came up with a cast with Joan Roberts as Laurie, Alfred Drake, famous Alfred Drake, was the first Curly, Celeste Holm was Ado Annie, and Howard Da Silva was Judd, who we know. So, now let me just tell you, there were a couple of things that we had to change, that they did make some changes in the original play, that they had to make some changes for the musical. One, in the play, Judd's name was Jeter, so they changed that to Judd. Ado Annie, strangely enough, in the play, was like this homely little farm girl. So they turned her into this little spitfire, the girl who can't say no. And the character of Will Parker, her love interest, was not a character. He's mentioned in the play, but they developed him more as a character, so that you had, like in traditional musicals, you had the romantic leads and the soubrette and the other characters. So that kind of then provided for some comedy elements into a play that really didn't have a lot of comedy.